We are like the Pepsi of pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And we're up against a really evil juggernaut. WWE is our competitor. That's who we're facing. AEW, like the Pepsi of pro wrestling. WWE's like the Harvey Weinstein of pro wrestling. And I'm really proud of what we do down here.
I think and,
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today, we're going to talk about an article, Tony Khan Comes Out Swinging, by Jesse Collins of Voices of Wrestling. My favorite. And this is, of course, about Tony Khan having the right to fight back against WWE. And, of course, this was after he made the Harvey Weinstein comments on the NFL Network. So we got to get into this. Ought to be fun, and we ought to enjoy it together. In a carefully crafted attempt to gain mainstream media attention for his wrestling company, AEW owner Tony Khan appeared on the NFL Draft wearing a neck brace, selling the fact that Khan had been a part of a wrestling angle on AEW Dynamite the night before, where he had been given a pile driver by the Young Bucks. And what was the key point of the massive angle where the Elite wage war against the established order in AEW. Pause. The Elite are the established order in AEW. They've always been the established order in AEW. But here's the thing. He did get kind of made fun of for having the neck brace on, as Pat McAfee and a couple of other people tried to explain to folks why he was wearing a neck brace. And it was kind of funny because he was not acting like a person who had an injured neck. Now, a lot of people was giving him a ton of credit for continuously wearing the neck brace on the draft, but he also got shit for not keeping up with the gimmick and just fully moving his neck willy-nilly when if you have an injured neck that requires a neck brace, you wouldn't do. But I'm going to give him a +1 for keeping up with kayfabe. I'm going to do that. So the next is talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars, which of course the team owns. And then he says, on Friday, Khan appears in a talking segment on NFL Network where he talked a little bit about his wrestling promotion, and when comparing AEW to WWE said the following. This is where we get into the evil competitors and the Harvey Weinstein of pro wrestling. He says, labeling WWE as a, quote, really evil juggernaut and the, quote, Harvey Weinstein of pro wrestling are easily the most direct shots Khan has taken at WWE since he started AEW. While Khan once was very neutral, at least publicly, about WWE, suggesting in the past that he was not against working with them, and consistently saying that AEWs will, quote, not at war with anybody, Khan has clearly shifted his public stance towards being heavily against WWE. This is incorrect. He was probably neutral in like maybe 2019 and maybe 2020, but since 2021, he has been almost actively against WWE, so it's been at least 3 years that he's been acting like this, but I guess we're supposed to pretend that none of this stuff is happening. And there was probably stuff before 2021, but I dare not look that far back. He says, quote, the reason for this shift is likely because trying to be politically ambivalent towards WWE publicly hasn't helped Khan in the slightest. WWE has run an active publicity campaign against AEW dating back to Vince McMahon labeling the company as blood and guts in 2019 and has been trying to muscle AEW out of the market since the company's inception. This is incorrect framing of what happened. Vince was asked a question about the blood in AEW, and Vince says that the WWE is not going to go back to that kind of blood and guts presentation. He never mentioned AEW directly for no good reason. It was always because he was asked a question. And his answer was really about not going back to the Attitude Era because the company can't go backwards. He's talking about having a more sophisticated presentation. That was his opinion because he was the guy running the company. It was not a publicity campaign against AEW. He was asked a question about AEW having blood and thinking WWE should do blood in response. And he said, no, we're not doing blood and guts. We're not going to do what they're doing. We've evolved from that crap, I believe was his actual words. But it wasn't like he just bullied AEW for no good reason. See, why are you taking things out of context? Like, that's completely out of context. Next, he says, trying to ignore WWE's constant swipes and attempts to damage AEW's reputation has only led to AEW looking relatively hapless when WWE enjoys the bounty of taking the low road. WWE can try and coerce advertisers into being upset with the use of the pizza cutter during a match on AEW Dynamite, attempt to tamper with AEW contracted wrestlers, and have former Nick Khan client Ariel Helwani, who has morphed into WWE's personal hatchet man in the media, accuse Tony Khan of being a cocaine addict. None of it has led to a bad publicity for WWE. Most of the attention has been heaped onto Tony Khan and AEW. I will say this. That latter one is more personal than a WWE thing. Ariel Helwani and Tony Khan have a personal thing. Ariel Helwani being friends with Nick Khan that's okay, but it's not like WWE put him up to it. Ariel Helwani and Tony Khan personally have an issue. They've been going back and forth. Tony Khan has claimed that Ariel Helwani is two-faced and that he's a WWE shill and all this kind of stuff. When Ariel gave Tony Khan a platform to promote his product, but he wouldn't answer any questions. This one is a personal beef between these two guys. And Ariel Helwani, of course, did do the old saying that Tony Khan was a cokehead. That part is true. And it was funny, but it was inappropriate. But Ariel Helwani is not even considered wrestling media anyway. Even though he does wrestling interviews with some wrestlers, he's not really considered wrestling media. He's more considered MMA media because that's more his beat. Just like sometimes you'll see TV personalities on Raw or TV personalities do interviews with pro wrestlers. They're not really in the wrestling media, but they may like wrestling. Their kids may like it, and their kids may like and enjoy WWE, which seems to be Ariel Helwani's thing, is that he was a wrestling fan as a kid, but he doesn't follow it as part of his career. So him giving Tony Khan a platform, he saw it as an opportunity to, further Tony Khan, but Tony Khan wouldn't want to give him anything, so that led to a personal beef between the two of them. That's one thing. The WWE trying to coerce AEW's advertisers. I don't know how true that is. That's a conspiracy theory. The same thing with the AEW contracted wrestlers. That's another thing with the contract tampering. Because it's like, for starters, we were never given any details over whose contracts were tampered with. People just believed. I think Swerve might have been the only person who said he got a phone call. And then he says he didn't answer the phone. Then he says that he told them no. So it was like a back and forth thing that he wasn't quite sure how it happened. He says, oh, my people got a phone call. Then it was, oh, I got a phone call. Then it was, oh, they was contract tampering. It's like, I don't know. Inquiring, about your status. It's not quite contract tampering, because why would they want to get sued? That's over Swerve Strickland, by the way. I mean, come on. But whatever. Let's say that this stuff is true. So what? AEW does the same thing. They have attempted to attack WWE in every measurable way. We could talk about that in a second. But they've also tampered with contracts. And they've also suggested that people not sign with WWE. We're going to talk about that in a second again. But, this is just kind of silly. He continues, he being Jesse Collins. Despite his best efforts, Khan has not been treated fairly by the media. Say what? What? Wait a minute. I can't even finish this paragraph. What do you mean? Besides the absolute slob job they've been doing for Tony for the first 4 years the company was in operations, consistently voting him Booker of the Year, how AEW friendly journalists and, let's say, Variety were writing positively about AEW and negatively about WWE. We did videos on all that stuff, by the way. You can go back into my archives and look at, Variety, TV Guide, a bunch of other media talking negative about WWE and praising AEW. And a lot of them because they were given interviews by Tony Khan, was giving them interviews, giving them access to CM Punk and the Elite and Kenny Omega, etc. And so they were attacking him. But to say that Tony Khan hasn't been given a fair shake, it's like, what are you talking about? The main media of pro wrestling has been WrestleNomics, which attacks WWE almost daily. Post Wrestling, which is now along with WrestleNomics, pretty much attacks WWE daily. Wrestling Observer Newsletter, who has voted pretty much everybody in the upper echelon of AEW as the best wrestlers of all time, the best tag team of all time, 10 stars, all this kind of stuff. And they're not being treated fairly because a couple of people on Twitter said that Tony Khan likes to waste money and blow coke. All of a sudden, he hasn't been getting treated fairly in the media? Oh, come on. Get out of here with that. Get out of here with that. WWE and the loyalty the company has, especially in the wrestling media, has been able to paint the picture that Khan is a clown that is out of his depth running a wrestling promotion that dares challenge WWE. YouTube is littered with thumbnails of a confused-looking Tony Khan as aggregators try to sell the entertainment of a supposedly ignorant wrestling promoter trying to take on WWE. Websites are thrilled to run headlines that share the opinions of hacks like Eric Bischoff, who find constant criticism of Khan's leadership of the company. All right, now compare all of the criticism that Tony Khan has received in 5 years. Compare all of that to the same criticism that Vince McMahon has been getting from the same wrestling media for, let's not even say 30 years. Let's just say since 2012. All right, from 2012 to about 2019 when he started, having his issues. Well, I think he started having issues more in 2022. So go back to 2017, right? Go back to 2017. Between 2017 and 2022, did Vince McMahon get a ton of criticism in the wrestling media? Pretty much every week. People were claiming WWE was going to get kicked off of Fox a year into the deal. They were talking about, the ratings suck. They're going to get kicked off Fox. It ended up being true. But the idea that Tony Khan has been criticized by people on YouTube, it's like, who hasn't? Everybody gets criticized by people on YouTube. Oh, Jim Cornette and Eric Bischoff, they criticize, they dare criticize Tony Khan. They criticize Vince too. They criticize Triple H too. They criticize Billy Corgan. They criticize Dixie Carter. They criticize Paul Heyman. It's like, who is free from criticism in this scenario? Everybody gets criticized, brother. This is pretty dumb, man. And again, the wrestling media has been almost overwhelmingly glowing about Tony Khan and AEW. It's only been within the last 2 years or so, since the CM Punk debacle, that people have kind of flipped and started criticizing Tony Khan a little bit more. Here's another one. Khan attempts to play nice with WWE have been a complete failure and exposed a wrestling media sphere that was never willing to give his company a fair chance anyway. No matter what Khan did, it was going to be presented by people who, whether people under the influence of WWE's public relations operation or a simply WWE loyal fan, as a failure of his leadership. Tony Khan is a victim, guys. He is such a victim. Oh my goodness. All these people, they don't blow him enough. They didn't bend over and take enough of Tony Khan's inches. That's the problem here. I mean, all the awards that all of these sites, from Wrestle Purists to Cage Match to Wrestling Observer Newsletter, all the praise that Pro Wrestling Illustrated, naming like the Young Bucks Tag Team of the Year or FTR when they were clearly behind the Usos, all this kind of stuff, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. You're supposed to praise more. It's not enough for you to bow in reverence. You must kneel. You must absolutely put your forehead on the floor for Tony Khan, because any criticism is too much for AEW and its fans. And all the criticism of Tony Khan has been very, very mild, by the way. It's all been very mild. Nobody has really gone after him personally outside of the whole cokehead nepotism stuff. They haven't, really gone after Tony Khan yet. Let's go back to this. So Khan has decided to come out swinging. He compared WWE, a company that is currently being sued for sex trafficking and has been mired in scandal over the last 18 months, to disgraced movie studio executive Harvey Weinstein. It was a calculated move by Khan, who took the publicity of the neck brace angle during the NFL draft as an opportunity to punch WWE square in the face. Here's the issue. The NFL is partnered with WWE, And not to mention, why would you make something that is not about WWE about WWE? You're on television to sell the angle that you were involved in. And now all people are talking about is your comments about WWE. For starters, I do believe it trivializes the Harvey Weinstein situation, where there may have been people who were legitimately harmed by Harvey Weinstein and his associates. So to use them as a punchline is kind of in poor taste. That being said, outside of it being in poor taste, why would anybody be offended by it? Because the whole point here is Tony Khan had a terrible week. It came out, I think, at the Wrestling Observer newsletter that Dynasty sold fewer buys for their pay-per-view than both Revolution and World's End, and that the ratings hit 600 some odd thousand, almost NXT levels. So, and as a way to distract from you talking about the poor attendance, the poor buy rate, the poor ratings, he starts talking about WWE and sex trafficking. It's a way of completely and totally moving the conversation forward and not addressing what he is going through as the promoter running this company, and has been criticized for not running the company appropriately. And people who recognize that the company could be doing better and should be doing better, he now has got you guys talking about WWE and sex trafficking again, because you don't get to talk about how poorly AEW is doing. Back to the article. For the past several weeks, Khan, like everyone else, watched as WWE did a full-fledged publicity press around WrestleMania 40, with very little acknowledgement from the media that the company was currently engaged in a major lawsuit regarding sex trafficking, and that Vince McMahon has seemingly been deleted from WWE history. Stephanie McMahon, who has disappeared from the company previously and has been named as one of the corporate officers in the lawsuit from Janelle Grant, even made a surprise appearance at WrestleMania. Yes, because everybody realizes that it's not about WWE, it's more about Vince McMahon. And since Vince McMahon is the one who's going to be handling all of this stuff, people moved. I'm sorry that, I hate to cut myself off, but I'm sorry that everybody's not trying to turn what they love into a conversation about sex trafficking. How much more of this shit can people talk about? There's nobody knows what happened. Nobody was there. The legal system has not sorted anything out. Nobody's been arrested yet. At the time of WrestleMania, there was no response from Vince McMahon yet. What is there to talk about? Triple H was asked about it. I believe Nick Khan was asked about it. But are you supposed to harp on the subject? How much is too much of this stuff? It's not like it went completely and totally unaddressed. People asked questions about it, and then folks moved on. Because guess what? There was nothing to say. It was all about whether people knew or not. Hey, what did you know? I didn't know nothing. I didn't read the lawsuit. Remember, they kept asking Cody about it. They asked Becky Lynch about it. They asked CM Punk about it. They asked a bunch of wrestlers about it. But these folks keep saying, nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. It's like, what do you mean nobody's talking about it? Every time I turned around during WrestleMania season, between January and April, pretty much every major wrestler on the roster was asked about it, except maybe Roman Reigns. So this is completely and totally disingenuous. And the idea that Stephanie McMahon made a return and she was named in the lawsuit, she was not named. What happened is there was some WrestleNomics guys they've been slaving over this whole thing, trying to make it a bigger story than it really is. And they were in steady contact, let's say. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, with Ann Callis, who is the lawyer for one of the lawyers for Janelle Grant. And they came up with, we're just going to name some random officers in WWE. And she said, oh, yes, these are definitely the people. And I think Stephanie and Nick Khan and another guy, Blum or something like that, was the three people that they were talking about here. But they're not named in the lawsuit, by the way. So the idea that they were named in the lawsuit is incorrect. The lawsuit has remained unchanged. It just says corporate officer number 1, corporate officer number 2, etc. So it is what it is. Move on. Paul Levesque gleefully appeared in front of the media for post-WrestleMania press conferences after both nights of the event, and hardly faced any questions that were related to the ongoing scandal that will be threatening to submarine the entire company. Meanwhile, Khan continues to face an uphill battle in getting a fair media representation of both himself and his company. Triple H was asked directly about it, and he said he did not read the lawsuit. That's what he said. Shawn Michaels was asked about it too before NXT, and he responded. Cody Rhodes was asked about it. CM Punk was asked about it. Nick Khan was asked about it. I mean, who wasn't asked about it? Again, why are these people lying? See, when you lie, you lose credibility. All right? It's one thing for you to say, well, I don't think it was sufficient. There wasn't enough pushback, blah, blah, blah. But they were asked about it, directly asked about this thing. And you may not have liked the answers that they gave, but they were asked about it. Trying to pretend that they weren't is completely and totally disingenuous. Let's move on. Since Khan was never given a fair chance anyway, he decided to throw some punches. And they landed. While Khan will surely be raked over the coals by the usual suspects who will decry about his unprofessional behavior, while also largely ignoring the actual sex scandal that has enveloped WWE, Khan did at least shift some of the conversation back to the ongoing investigation that is currently taking place in WWE. Because he don't want you talking about the not ongoing investigation that Chris Jericho was supposedly involved with that we kind of just disappeared, that we don't talk about. We also are not talking about Don Callis, who as a, what's the appropriate word, executive at Impact, was involved with some shady business. We also don't talk about that. We also don't talk about Darby Allin, who is also supposedly involved with some really shady business. We just don't talk about these kinds of things because they're not relevant. You know, the WWE is mostly Vince McMahon and their lawyers are going to handle it. Again, there is nothing else to talk about right now because there has been no responses until Vince's response the other day, which was, I believe, April the 26th, maybe the 24th, or whatever. But this video is being recorded after the Vince McMahon response, because this article was written after the Vince McMahon response, which is, oddly enough, not addressed in here at all. Going back to the subject, Khan is unlikely to ever truly win a public relations war against WWE. That battle has been lost a long time ago, thanks to numerous advantages WWE holds as an institution of entertainment. However, Khan and AEW are trying to appease WWE hardcore fans, and appeal to everyone has not been a productive method for AEW in terms of generating good publicity. It was time the gloves came off. And at least this way, Khan can get some value if he is going to be treated unfairly by the media anyway. What an entertaining article that literally is full of, lies and half-truths. But that's Voices of Wrestling for you. They're just all the way in the bag for AEW. These are guys who absolutely hate WWE. They're mostly pro-New Japan guys usually, but AEW, of course, more of their bag. That's their gimmick. They have openly had guys come out in public and say they hate WWE and they hope the company fails, all this kind of stuff. So they try to write these articles as if, they're not an organ of AEW essentially. But I don't really care about that. Let's talk about this idea that Tony Khan has been neutral about WWE, that he hasn't been taking his shots. It's always been Triple H and all those guys taking shots at AEW. In October 2021, they were leading up to, quote, the Friday Night War, which Tony Khan named the Friday Night War. And leading up to it, he says that a recent episode of Monday Night Raw sucked. He tweeted at WWE saying that he can't wait to beat their main show head to head. He also said that he had more money than they do when he heard that SmackDown might run 30 minutes commercial free. Then he also says in 2022 that WWE pays for anti-AEW bots. And he said he had an independent study that would prove that. I understand that they claim that there has been some kind of proof since then, but that proof has not materialized. There has been no study. In June 2023, he claimed that Warner Brothers told him to be a challenger brand and to attack WWE. In October 2023, Tony Khan took a shot at John Cena and Undertaker for appearing on NXT, which ran opposite AEW for one night as Dynamite was preempted. At this point in time, it should be noted that when Tony Khan's Dynamite was running opposite NXT, he was bringing in people like Shaq and Mike Tyson, etc., to compete with NXT. So that shouldn't be that big of a deal. In September 2023, Tony Khan talked about there being a, quote, lack of loyalty in the wrestling business, and saying that AEW is a family business and not a public company, and they're loyal partners to Warner Brothers Discovery. Unlike, he didn't say WWE, but it was like, unlike WWE, who has multiple business partners, and he has questioned their principles. In November 2023, he also went off about this Friday Night War thing, the 30-minute overlap between SmackDown and Rampage. This, of course, led to him absolutely losing his mind about how CM Punk won the Friday Night War, that he named the Friday Night War, by the by. And he's been going on about that for a little while. And I forgot to mention that back in November 2021, Tony Khan criticized WWE contracts as, quote, temporary arrangements, while people who come work for AEW are considered lifers, and said that there was no security in WWE contracts. In January 2024, Tony Khan attacked USA Network and WWE over USA Network's making a comment about Cage Match, in which he then started talking about Jinder Mahal and how he's not a credible challenger against Seth Rollins. This has all happened within the last 3 years of this guy claiming he don't take shots at WWE. And again, I stuck to just Tony Khan. I did not take into account all the shots that the Young Bucks take, Kenny Omega takes, when CM Punk was working there, how they took so many shots at WWE, how Taz took shots at WWE on AEW television, calling them a sloppy shop when people were getting COVID, and how a lot of that COVID stuff, they kind of kept it under wraps because AEW stars were getting COVID too, and that was nobody talked about that. There has been a lot of back and forth between the two companies. People seem to have recency bias where, oh my God, there was, Pat McAfee and CM Punk took some shots at AEW during WrestleMania weekend, and all of a sudden, WWE is talking about AEW all the time. It's like, pretty much every episode of Dynamite has been some wrestler, whether it's MJF, whether it's FTR, it was somebody, Edge, somebody talking about WWE in some way. So this idea that Tony Khan is being treated unfairly, it's like, get out of here. They've been slobbing his knob for 5 years, especially the upper echelon of wrestling media. People like me and some others, we're the rare people on this platform that actually go after Tony Khan and try to hold him to some kind of accountability for how terrible Dynamite is at most weeks and how boring the shows are. There's very few people who do that. Most people put over the product. So yes, Jim Cornette and Eric Bischoff. And Bischoff started going after Tony Khan after Tony Khan attacked Ted Turner. All right. And said some stuff about the NWO and said some stuff that kind of pissed Eric Bischoff off, because Bischoff was on the side of Tony Khan for a while there too. And Jim Cornette's been against him since the beginning, but so that's different. Now, when it comes to Busted Open Radio, Mark Henry works for AEW. He's been on Busted Open Radio the entire time AEW's been around. Tony Khan used to be able to go onto Busted Open Radio and had 30 minutes or so free publicity where he took no criticism. He virtually took no questions during the entire time. And only when he was pressed did he decide he doesn't want to do Busted Open Radio anymore. So now people are a little bit more open and dissing him. And this is almost the exact same situation as Ariel Helwani, where as long as he's got a platform to talk and you don't ask him any tough questions, he will talk. He'll talk about the angles. He'll talk about the wrestlers. He'll take his cheap shots at WWE, whatever the case may be, but he does not want to talk about any controversial issue. And if you say something about him, he'll freeze you out. And that's something that people have been hearing for a long time now, is that he's decided to freeze people out. And thus, he doesn't really do media. But for a long time, they were blowing him kisses from far away. It's only been within the last 2 years or so that people have started really getting at him. And it's ridiculous. And you're playing in your face by saying, well, they don't give Tony Khan a fair shot. What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? There were people saying that AEW was going to beat Raw. There was people quoting Jericho, we're going to beat Raw in the ratings. There's articles written to that effect every week talking about how AEW is beating NXT and how Tony Khan is so great. That stuff stopped because it wasn't going to last forever. Because you eventually do stuff that people will criticize. And how you handle the criticism has been criticized. And that's mostly what it is people criticizing that Tony Khan can't take criticism. And in this situation, again, the Harvey Weinstein comment, who cares? All of this stuff is to distract you from the fact that Tony Khan's company, the buys for their most recent pay-per-view, was lower than the buys for the previous 2 pay-per-views. The ratings had hit the toilet, and the buildings are virtually fucking empty. That's the problem. That's what's going on here. We should be talking about that. That's what he should be talking about, rather. Not whatever is going on in Stanford. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace.